Today, we're diving into some of the latest developments in the 2024 presidential election. And the big story is that Donald Trump has surged to a 62 chance of winning, according to betting markets and polls. That's the highest he's seen so far, and it's particularly noteworthy now that Kamala Harris has officially entered the race. What's interesting here is that Harris, who was already facing an uphill battle, is now seeing some of her worst odds yet as the Democratic nominee. In this episode, we're going to take a detailed look at how things are shaping up in key battleground states, how Trump has built up this commanding lead, and what these trends mean as we inch closer to election day. Let's begin by talking about the Midwest, a region that has been crucial in past elections and remains a key area to watch. Two states that have shifted firmly into the Republican column are Iowa and Ohio. Just a few election cycles ago, both were considered true swing states, but now Trump's odds of winning them are at an overwhelming 94. This is a huge shift from how things looked before Trump's first run in 2016, when Iowa and Ohio were much more competitive. Back then, they were classic bellwether states, but Trump's victories in these states in 2016 and 2020 changed that narrative. In both elections, he won comfortably, and all indications are that 2024 will be no different. The high odds in Iowa and Ohio reflect how solidly Republican these states have become under Trump's influence. It's safe to say that, barring any massive surprises, Trump will carry both states easily once again, making them practically a lock for his campaign. This is significant not just because of the electoral votes at stake, but also because it shows just how much the political landscape has shifted in these once competitive states. But before we get into the details, hit the subscribe button, like this video, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for your support. Moving to the Sun Belt, the dynamics are a bit more fluid, but the trends are still favoring Trump. Texas, which has long been the subject of speculation about whether it might eventually flip to the Democrats, remains a go-be stronghold in 2024. There's been a lot of talk in recent years about Texas changing demographics. While the influx of younger, more diverse voters might push the state toward becoming more competitive for Democrats. But that doesn't seem to be happening, at least not in this election cycle. Trump's current odds of winning Texas are also at 94, which essentially means he's all but guaranteed to keep the state in Republican column. Now, the margin of victory might be an interesting thing to watch. In 2016, Trump won Texas by about 9 points, but by 2020, that lead had shrunk to around 5 points. This time around, betting markets are predicting that Trump will not only hold on to Texas, but he might even expand his margin of victory, potentially winning by double digits. That would be a significant win, not just because of Texas' large number of electoral votes, but also because it would send a strong signal that despite demographic shifts, Texas remains firmly in the GOP camp. Let's shift over to Florida, another key state that has often been a battleground in presidential elections. In both 2016 and 2020, Florida played a critical role, and Trump won it narrowly in 2016 by just one. By 2020, his margin had grown to over 3 points. And now in 2024, the odds are heavily in Trump's favor once again, with a 94 chance of victory. What's particularly striking about this is that Trump's lead in Florida seems to be growing even more, with some analysts projecting that he could win by as much as 7 to 10 points. This shift is partly due to demographic changes within Florida itself, particularly among Latino voters who have increasingly leaned Republican in recent years. Cuban American voters in South Florida, for instance, have become a reliable base for Trump. And if he can solidify that support, Florida could become an even deeper shade of red than it has been in the past. A significant win in Florida, given its status as a perennial swing state, would be a major boost for Trump's campaign and could potentially alter the political map for future elections. Historically, Florida has always been a state that's too close to call. But if Trump's support continues to grow here, it could indicate a long-term shift in Florida's political alignment. Now, let's look at Alaska. Although it's a smaller state in terms of the electoral votes, it's still important for Trump to lock down every state possible, and he's expected to win Alaska handily. His odds there are also at 94. So while Alaska doesn't usually get the kind of attention that larger battleground states do, it's still a critical part of Trump's electoral strategy. Alaska has consistently voted Republican for decades, and Trump's support there remains strong. making it another near certain win for him. On the flip side, let's talk about Kamala Harris and her chances in some of the states where she is still favored. Despite Trump's growing momentum, Harris is expected to do well in a few key regions, particularly in the Southwest and Northeast. For instance, New Mexico is one state where Harris holds a clear lead. Her odds of winning New Mexico are currently at 90, which isn't surprising given the state's historical lean toward the Democratic Party. In the 2020 election, Joe Biden won New Mexico by 11 points. And while there's been some movement in the demographics, particularly among Hispanic voters, New Mexico is expected to remain blue for now. However, it's worth noting that if the Republican Party continues to make gains with Hispanic voters, nationally, New Mexico could become more competitive in future elections. Minnesota is another state where Harris is currently favored to win, in part because she's chosen Governor Tim Walz as her running mate. Minnesota has been a reliable Democratic state in presidential elections, having voted blue since 1972, and Harris is expected to continue that trend. That being said, the race in Minnesota is closer than expected, with Trump's odds of winning the state reaching as high as 44. At one point, polls show Harris leading by just under 4 points, which is a smaller margin than Biden's 7-point victory in 2020. Still, Minnesota is likely to remain in the Democratic column, though it may be a closer race than we've seen in the past. Harris also has a strong chance of winning in Maine and New Hampshire, two northeastern states where Democrats have traditionally performed well. Her odds of winning Maine are 87, and in New Hampshire, she has an 85 chance of victory. These states have become a bit more competitive as Trump gains ground, but Harris remains the favorite in both. Additionally, she's expected to carry Virginia, though the race there has tightened significantly. Currently, Harris has an 85 chance winning Virginia, but Trump has made notable inroads in the state. Virginia has been trending Democratic for years, but the fact that Trump is even competitive, there is a sign that Republicans are gaining ground. Now, let's talk about the real battleground states, those that are truly up for grabs and could swing the election in either direction. Arizona is one of the most critical states to watch. Trump narrowly lost Arizona in 2020, but in 2024, he's favored to win it back with a 71 chance of victory. Polls show Trump leading Harris by a slim margin of 1.6, and Arizona's 11 electoral votes could be crucial in determining the outcome of this election. Georgia is another key battleground where Trump is favored to regain ground after his narrow loss in 2020. His odds in Georgia are at 70, and recent polls show him leading by 1.8. Both Arizona and Georgia are absolutely essential to Trump's path to victory, and winning them back would put him in a very strong position. North Carolina is also leaning toward Trump, though the state is more competitive due to challenges facing the Republican candidate for governor, Mark Robinson. Still, Trump's odds of winning North Carolina are at 70, making it another state that could play a key role in the final electoral count. Meanwhile, Pennsylvania, often considered one of the most crucial swing states, is also leaning toward Trump. His odds of winning Pennsylvania are at 61, and he's holding a narrow lead in the polls. Given Pennsylvania's importance in past elections, this is definitely a state to watch, as it could be the one that ultimately decides the election. Trump is also leading Michigan and Wisconsin, two other Midwestern states that could prove pivotal. His odds of winning Michigan are at 57 and Wisconsin. They're at 56. Both states were key to Trump's victory in 2016, and flipping them back in 2024 would be a major coup for his campaign. Finally, let's talk about Nevada. This is a state that hasn't voted Republican in a presidential election since 2004, but Trump's odds of winning Nevada in 2024 are at 56, giving him a real shot at flipping the state. While Nevada doesn't have a large number of electoral votes, it could still be an important piece of the puzzle if the election is close. So what do these numbers tell us about the overall election landscape? Right now, betting markets and polling data are pointing toward a strong likelihood that Trump will win. He's on track to secure around 312 electoral votes compared to Harris's 226, which would be a decisive victory. If Trump continues to build momentum in these key battleground states, he could be headed for one of the largest margins of victory in a presidential election in recent history. Of course, things can change as we get closer to election day, but at the moment, Trump's chances of winning are looking stronger than ever.